Weekend. Former Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev, meanwhile, is backing calls for a rerun of the election. He says the parliamentary vote at the weekend was tainted by fraud. Unprecedented protests, these scenes you're seeing here against Prime Minister Putin and his United Russia Party continue. The man himself, meanwhile, has filed his papers to run for president. Correspondent Andrew Osborne in Moscow says Russia's concerned about these protests.
The Kremlin is very worried about this. It does have half an eye on the events that took place early this year, the so-called Arab Spring. Almost 15,000 Russians have signed up on Facebook, for example, and said that they will come along for an anti-Kremlin demonstration on Saturday. And social networking sites are reporting that a further 81 demonstrations are planned for Saturday in other Russian towns and cities. This is the Kremlin's worst fear, the idea that a so-called a colour revolution could challenge its rule. They've drafted in thousands of extra interior ministry troops into the Russian capital, Moscow. Helicopters have been buzzing overhead all day. And state TV has, interestingly, not even mentioned the fact that these protests, these unprecedented protests, have taken place in the last few days, which in itself must be a sign of Kremlin concern. So yes, I think the Kremlin is worried, and they're going to do everything they can to stop these demonstrations taking place, and they're going to do everything they can to resist these calls from people like Mr. Gorbachev to agree to a rerun of last Sunday's parliamentary election.
Andrew Osborne there, the latest from Moscow, where those protests continue. The issue, of course, allegations of election fraud, and the crowds critical of Vladimir Putin. Next, police have used tear gas against crowds in Kinshasa. The people were supporters of the president.